This project is associated with untangling the complex social and managerial dynamics surrounding a wicked problem that I'm involved with in my home protected area where I work as a planner. Everyone involved with this management problem is struggling to understand the issue and to improve the situation. So, in addition to the project being an opportunity for me to explore a complex protected area wildlife-human conflict issue, it's a real-life problem that I hope that I can influence to the benefit of the improvement of the conditions within the protected area that I work in using the concepts provided by the course. The topic is about black bear human conflicts on the Rogue National Wild and Scenic River, an iconic and high-profile river protected area located in the western United States. And this black bear is just one of the local residents that frequent the area. So, what is a wicked problem? In contemporary natural resource management, a wicked problem is a problem that is difficult or impossible to solve because of incomplete, contradictory, and conflicting social values that surround the problem, which are often difficult to characterize. Wicked problems resist simple solutions because there is a lack of agreement about the nature of the problem itself. There is social uncertainty surrounding the management goals and objectives, and the problem resists commonly understood measures of success. The social complexity of the problem links proposed solutions to other problems within the system, triggering a cascade of other effects without a defined stopping point. Solutions for wicked problems can only be characterized as more or less useful based on the unique sociocultural context surrounding the issue. The problem resists right or wrong solution because of the diversity of values represented by the issue. Template or standardized approaches don't often work because the problem is linked within a unique social-cultural context. The standard framing of wicked problems and their solutions often represent the tip of the iceberg, and there's often much more going on beneath the surface and out of view. This pretty much sums up the state of human-bear interactions and human-bear habituation on the Rogue Wild and Scenic River right now. The Lower Rogue Wild and Scenic River is an 84-mile stretch of free-flowing river located in southwestern Oregon, and it is one of the first rivers to have been added to the United States system of protected rivers referred to as the National System of Wild and Scenic Rivers here in the United States. The headwaters of the river flow out of the Cascade Mountains, descend through the Rogue Valley, and enter into the Klamath-Siskiyou Mountains, where it meets with the ocean near the town of Gold Beach. The yellow circle on the map is about where the designated stretch of the Lower Rogue Wild and Scenic River is located. The area consists of a protected area complex, including the river, which is IUCN Category 5, several Category 1B wilderness areas which adjoin the river, and a national recreation trail. The river is jointly managed by two federal agencies, the U.S. Forest Service and the U.S. Bureau of Land Management. Wildlife populations are managed by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. The designated river has a comprehensive river management plan, which is required by the law. The river was designated in 1968 and the management plan was completed in 1972, a 49-year-old management plan. Needless to say, a few things have changed by then. The Rogue is among a handful of multi-day whitewater river recreation areas in the United States located in a robust wilderness setting. Visitation to these recreation and conservation assets are in high demand, and for many visitors, a trip down the Rogue constitutes an adventure of a lifetime. The permit lottery has an approximately 2% success rate. Access to the river is limited by a permit system, and visitor practices and behaviors are highly regulated in order to protect the quality of the canyon environment. Approximately 13,000 people each year float the 34-mile wild section of the river, and several thousand backpackers hike the 43-mile National Recreation Trail which parallels the river. The area is largely managed for non-motorized boating, although motorboats can travel approximately 9 miles up the Lower River. Commercial services are provided by a dozen outfitter guide companies, and about half the annual use is allocated for commercial river trips. The protected area complex is also highly sought after by conservationists. The area constitutes one of the last remaining large, relatively intact areas available for congressional designation in the U.S. Pacific Northwest Coast Range. Management of the area attracts significant local, regional, and national interest. Lastly, the socio-cultural context and connections with the landscape are strong and influential. The Rogue is a cherished local resource of national significance with a rich, deep local history and wide constituency of strong opinions and beliefs. Everyone loves the Rogue, and everyone has an opinion of how it should be managed. And everyone has their own way of keeping bears out of camp, and they all believe that their method works best. That is, until it doesn't. Southwest Oregon has some of the best bear habitat remaining in the state, and a healthy population of black bears frequent and live in the protected area. Extraordinary bear and wildlife viewing opportunities are one of the protected values which contributed to the designation of the area in 1968. Food-conditioned and habituated bears result from inappropriate visitor food storage practices, lack of education, and generally irresponsible camp management. Almost every year, bears get into trouble, and sometimes bears have had to be dispatched when they become too comfortable, aggressive, or habituated around people. The management objectives for the Wild and Scenic River are found in the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act, as well as the Comprehensive River Management Plan. So this is some language from the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act that reflects how the wild river area is supposed to be managed. The surrounding wild rogue wilderness area is also managed according to the requirements of the 1964 Wilderness Act. Here you can see some of the river plan objectives for how the area is to be managed. Both the law and the management plan are relatively consistent in their guidance on the management setting for the wild river. The management emphasizes a primitive recreation setting managed for vital conservation purposes with an emphasis on improving wildlife habitat and where visitors will interact with the natural world utilizing maximum outdoor skills and minimal support from human structures and developments. So for example, we see language that suggests that the area resembles a vestige of primitive America with natural, wild, and primitive conditions, and special efforts will be made to improve the wildlife habitat. Lastly, you can see that the management plan guidance emphasizes managing for wildlife sightings consistent with good management practices. But the question is, how do we do that? What are good management practices? Rogue boaters enter into the system with various size commercial and non-commercial groups up to 30 people maximum group size who can float the river for up to 7 days. The average trip length is 3 nights and 4 days. That's a lot of food and it's a lot of equipment. There are over 100 undeveloped primitive campsites that accommodate various group sizes located along the river. The government, in its effort to reduce human-bear conflicts, has installed electric bear-resistant fences. You can see a picture here on the right-hand side of what one of those bear fences look like. These fences have been installed at a dozen of the most popular campsites, which accommodate the largest groups. So the largest campsites get the bear fences. And these are also the most likely camps to experience bear encounters. There are a few bear-resistant food storage boxes and food hoists, cables strung between trees, located along the trail at various campsites. This electric bear fence system is labor-intensive to install, maintain, and remove each year in this remote area, and it stresses scarce agency staff resources. The fences can't be left up through the winter because they'll get washed away by high water flow events from the river. So these bear fences have to come in and go out every spring and fall. And the bear fences also must be maintained and need to be checked weekly to ensure that they are still working. In most years, the bear fences are not placed in the field until May. However, the bears and the boaters become active by mid-March. Also, our visitor center does not open until May, leaving 2 months where there are few resources available to attempt to modify human behaviors as they enter into bear country. Electric fence use is inconsistent and not mandatory. Many float trips and backpackers do not carry bear-resistant equipment of their own, and there is no requirement to do so. Many groups simply do their best and take their chances. Visitors are educated about bears when they pick up their float permit, and rangers visit camps on the river and discuss proper food storage. Two problem bears were shot by boaters independently and without authorization in 2017 and left floating in the river during the peak season. In 2019, the U.S. Forest Service publicly announced that they were going to remove all the bear fences from the corridor because they were deemed inconsistent with the management objectives, and really nobody was using them anymore. There was no alternative system provided, however, and no strategic education plan behind this action. That same year, in 2019, we had the highest reported levels of bear-human interactions ever recorded in 30 years of reporting. The bear fence were quickly reinstalled into the river corridor by July, which was pretty late in the season. By now, renewed internal and external interest has now been generated. Local, regional, and national environmental groups have engaged on the issue. Meaningful progress has slowed. Concerned about human risk and liability associated with bear-human interactions, in 2020, the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife proposed to open a bear hunting season along the river, which had been closed since the mid-1960s to protect those bear viewing opportunities. Public outcry ensues, and the proposal is withdrawn within 4 days. Progress on the issue has ground to a halt and drifted into interagency confusion. The tone of the issue has become increasingly vocal. Internally, agency staff close to the problem have proposed that the agency phase in a new regulatory system where boaters and hikers are required to provide their own bear-resistant equipment and use it. Some external constituencies want the agency to take this approach, while others do not. Agency decision makers are not supportive of this action, instead directing that more visitor education and more infrastructure be placed into the area. At this time, the strategy is to continue doing even more of what we were doing before without much change in conditions, because we are trying to solve the wrong problem. It's not a bear problem, it's a human, cultural, organizational problem. And this is where things stand today. So as you can see from that brief description, we are in the midst of a wicked problem. Players in the problem are operating in an uncoordinated manner. Many uncoordinated interests, including external interests, are trying to help based on their own understanding of the problem. It's a leaderless problem right now with no defined objectives going forward. Wicked problems resist solutions in the typical rational, comprehensive manner. Without clear management objectives and social agreement, solutions are not right or wrong, but are characterized as more or less helpful. There's little agreement on the nature of the problem and its solutions. There's no template to follow, and nothing to tell us what to do next. The management plan language is vague, out of date, with objectives that are subject to interpretation and vulnerable to judicial review. Wicked problems are inherently time-consuming and call for consensus building, facilitated learning networks, stakeholder involvement, in order to reach a point where some semblance of agreement can be reached. To find agreement and social license to move forward, holistic and integral thinking will be needed. For this rogue bear issue, I've come up with a number of recommendations that might help move the problem forward. First, I suggest that we frame the problem as a project rather than an issue. We need to assign a project leader, empower them, define what success looks like. Basically, we need to facilitate a project plan. Using science, collaborative involvement, stakeholder input, facilitated learning, we need to work to align efforts and interests toward a coordinated management approach with shared goals and measurable objectives. I recommend that we map the context of the representative interest to the problem, the networks of influence and social context, and then integrate those into a cohesive vision for action as represented by the plan. So we need to bring the stakeholders together and understand the different motivations and values that are working behind the scenes that are preventing this solutions from going forward. Lastly, this is a human, cultural, and organizational problem. It's not a bear problem. We're trying to solve the wrong problem. We need to solve the right problem. This is a cultural change from thinking of it as a rational, comprehensive science project, which would probably fail from a lack of support. We need to build a plan that matches how the recreational management system actually works. The role of the project manager should be more of a facilitator and a gatherer than a doer or a plan writer. Advancements toward a better future will be gained by aligning participants that have a stake in completing the work themselves in order to build ownership in the strategy and implementation of the short and long-term objectives. A successful outcome has more to do with the process than simply the plan. The plan represents a codification of the outcomes of an integrated collaborative learning process. The plan framework and objectives require a mechanism in order to be able to monitor and measure whether progress has been made. How would we know? How will success be defined? Are we making progress? So somewhere in this project plan, there needs to be some measures of objective outcomes and an ability to measure those and know if we are making a difference. Lastly, this plan needs to integrate multiple forms of knowledge and experience about the problem into the plan. So for example, a number of people in the boating community have suggested unconventional methods that they use to prevent bears from getting into their food that they believe are successful, work better, and are less expensive alternatives than the equipment certified by the U.S. Interagency Bear Committee. I suggest that we submit their methods for live testing with real bears, which takes place outside of Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. These are just a few examples of things that we could do to move this problem forward. It is clear that a scientific-based, rational, comprehensive plan based on science and the lack of social understanding is not going to work around this problem. The staff, feel pretty strongly that we need to transfer responsibility of bear resistance onto the users. And this is a practice that takes place in many, many places on public lands in the western United States in bear country. However, we're just not able to get there right now because the constituents internally and externally can't agree that that is the best solution for a problem which we have yet to define. Many protected area management problems and issues are difficult and challenging to resolve because they are influenced by a wide variety of forces which are outside the control of the protected area manager. Wildlife-human interactions are no different, as they are linked to a complex sociocultural system of beliefs and economic and political forces. The source of the problem often has much less to do with a simple rational scientific solution, which is how managers have traditionally responded to planning and management issues. New models and approaches are required to deal with the increasingly interrelated and complex challenges that we face today in natural resource and protected area management. As it turns out, the solution to wicked problems is the problem itself. By ensuring that our planning and management efforts measure a successful outcome, not simply by the production of a rational technical plan, but also measure our success by the quality of the process which was used to build that plan, the learning, the relationship and capacity building, then it seems that we have a better chance to build support and maintain support for protected area conservation and management, leading to improved protected area management effectiveness. Thank you very much.